I ate my Christmas dinner alone while my son celebrated with his new girlfriend's family just 3 miles away. The aluminum tray from the frozen turkey dinner still felt cold against my palms when I saw his Instagram post. 8 people around the mahogany table I'd helped him choose. Cordelia's children pulling Christmas crackers with my grandchildren. The caption read, "Perfect intimate Christmas with our blended family." Intimate. That word carved itself into my chest. 47 years I'd raised Sebastian, sang him to sleep every night for 18 years, taught him to tie his shoes, to drive, to be a man. Now he called me mother instead of mom when she was around. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. The December air bit through my wool coat as I walked back from the mailbox that morning, 73 years old, and still collecting my own mail, still living in the same house where I'd raised my son, still keeping the porch light on every night in case he decided to visit. He never did anymore. My name is Meredith Gilmore. I taught 5th grade for 37 years at Millbrook Elementary. My husband Harold died 3 years ago, after 44 years of marriage. We had 1 child together, 1 precious boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knees, who used to call me his best friend. That boy was now a 42-year-old man who barely spoke to me. The phone rang as I was sorting through Christmas cards from former students. Their faces smiled up at me from family photos. Children I'd taught were now sending me pictures of their own children. The handwriting on the envelopes was careful, respectful. They still called me Mrs. Gilmore. My own son had started calling me mother. I picked up the receiver. Sebastian's voice came through the line with that practiced tone he'd developed since meeting Cordelia Ashworth 6 months ago. The tone that meant he'd already made a decision and was simply informing me of it. "Mom, about Christmas dinner." My heart stopped. We'd had Christmas dinner together every year since Harold died. Every year since Sebastian was born, actually. It was our tradition, our sacred day. "Cordelia's parents are flying in from Connecticut." I gripped the phone tighter. The Ashworths, old money, country club memberships, the kind of people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Florida, the kind of people who made my son forget where he came from. "Small gathering this year, you understand?" Small gathering. The words echoed in my mind as I stared at the Christmas tree Harold and I had picked out together 3 years ago. The ornaments Sebastian had made in elementary school still hung from its branches. Construction paper angels with his gap-toothed smile. Popsicle stick stars covered in glitter. "I understand," I heard myself say. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how the boy who used to help me stuff the turkey could suddenly find no room for me at his table. I didn't understand how Cordelia's children, from her first marriage, had become more important than the woman who'd given him life. The line went quiet. Sebastian cleared his throat. "Maybe we can do something the weekend after. Just us. Just us." When had I become an afterthought in my own son's life? When had our Christmas tradition become something to be rescheduled around more important people? "Of course, sweetheart. You have a wonderful time." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my empty house. The Christmas cards from my former students stared up at me from the kitchen table. Children who remembered me. Children who valued what I'd given them. My own child had forgotten. I thought about the first Christmas after Harold died, how Sebastian had insisted I come to his house, how he'd made sure I felt included, how he'd said we were family, and family stuck together. That was before Cordelia. Before he'd started caring more about impressing her parents than honoring his own. The transformation had been gradual. First, he'd stopped calling as often. Then the visits became shorter, more formal. He'd started correcting my grammar when Cordelia was around, started telling stories about his childhood that somehow edited me out of them. I'd watched my son become a stranger, a man desperate to fit into a world that required him to forget where he came from. The next morning was Christmas Eve. I drove to the grocery store and bought a frozen turkey dinner. Stouffer's, the kind that came in an aluminum tray with compartments for stuffing and mashed potatoes. The kind I'd never imagined eating alone on Christmas Day. The cashier was a young girl with kind eyes. She looked at my single frozen dinner and smiled. Having a quiet Christmas? Something like that. I drove home through neighborhoods decorated with lights and inflatable Santas. Children played in front yards while their parents watched from porches. Families preparing for tomorrow's celebrations. Families who remembered what Christmas was supposed to mean. That evening I sat in Harold's chair and opened my laptop. I rarely used social media, but Sebastian had insisted I join Facebook to see pictures of my grandchildren. Atticus was 8 now. Scout was 6. They used to spend every weekend at my house before Cordelia came along. I scrolled through Sebastian's posts from the past few months. Pictures of him and Cordelia at charity galas. Pictures of their blended family at expensive restaurants. Pictures of weekend trips to the Ashworth family estate in Connecticut. I wasn't in any of them. In one photo, Sebastian stood with Cordelia and her parents at some fundraising event. He wore a tuxedo I'd never seen before. His arm was around Cordelia's waist. The caption read, "So grateful for my new family." New family. As if I'd been replaced. As if 37 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and proud moments at school plays had been erased by 6 months of country club dinners. I closed the laptop and went to bed. Tomorrow would be Christmas. Tomorrow I would eat alone while my son celebrated with people who'd known him for half a year. But as I lay in the darkness, something began to stir in my chest. Not sadness, not self-pity. Something harder. Something that felt like determination. I thought about the boy who used to help me bake Christmas cookies, who used to insist on staying up late to help me wrap presents, who used to say I was the best mom in the world. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under his new accent and his designer clothes, and his desperate need to impress people who would never truly accept him. Maybe it was time to remind him who he really was. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of morning that made you want to stay in bed forever. But I got up anyway, showered, put on the red dress I'd bought for Sebastian's Christmas dinner, the one I'd never get to wear. I heated the Stauffer's turkey dinner in the microwave. The aluminum tray felt cold against my palms even after the timer went off. Through my kitchen window, I could see the Chen family next door. 3 generations gathered around their breakfast table. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter was opening presents, the wrapping paper scattered across their living room floor like confetti. I ate my dinner at the kitchen table, alone. The stuffing tasted like cardboard. The turkey had the texture of rubber. But I ate every bite because throwing it away would have felt like giving up entirely. That's when I made the mistake of checking my phone. Sebastian had posted a photo on Instagram at 11:47 a.m. The mahogany dining table I'd helped him pick out 5 years ago. The one we'd spent an entire Saturday shopping for because he wanted something that would last generations. Now it was set for 8 people. 8 people who weren't me. I zoomed in on the image, studied every detail. The good china Harold and I had given them as a wedding gift. The crystal glasses that had belonged to my mother. The centerpiece of white roses and holly that looked professionally arranged. Cordelia sat at the head of the table where I should have been, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile perfectly practiced. Her children from her first marriage flanked her on both sides. Marcus was 12. Lily was 10. They'd been calling Sebastian Dad for 3 months now. My grandchildren sat across from them. Atticus wore the Christmas sweater I'd knitted him, red wool with a reindeer pattern that had taken me weeks to complete. Scout had on the velvet dress I'd bought her for Christmas, the one I'd wrapped carefully and left under Sebastian's tree 2 weeks ago. They all looked so happy, so complete, so much like a real family. Sebastian stood behind Cordelia's chair with his hands on her shoulders. He wore the burgundy tie I'd given him last Christmas, the one he'd said was too formal for his taste. Apparently it was perfect for the Ashworths. The caption read, "Grateful for this perfect intimate Christmas with our blended family. Sometimes the best gifts come in unexpected packages." Intimate. That word again, perfect, blended. I wasn't mentioned. Not even as a footnote. Not even as the woman who'd given him life. I scrolled through the comments. Cordelia's friends gushing about how beautiful everything looked. Sebastian's co-workers complimenting the table setting. The Ashworth family members welcoming him into their fold. Not one comment asked where I was. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. At the framed photo of Sebastian's graduation from college. At the picture of him and Harold fishing at the lake. At the Mother's Day card he'd made me in 3rd grade that I'd kept for 34 years. The house felt smaller, somehow. Quieter. As if the walls themselves were pressing in on me. I thought about calling my sister in Florida. About pretending everything was fine. About spending the day watching Christmas movies and feeling sorry for myself. But then I remembered something else. A Christmas from long ago. 1987. Sebastian was 14 years old and desperate to fit in with the popular kids at school. The Weatherby family had invited him to their Christmas party. The rich family, on Elm Street with the big house and the fancy cars. He'd begged me to let him skip our family dinner, promised he'd make it up to me, said it was the chance of a lifetime to be accepted by the right people. I'd said no, not because I was cruel, not because I didn't want him to have nice things, but because I'd grown up poor, and I knew what happened when you spent your whole life chasing acceptance from people who would never truly accept you. He'd been angry with me for weeks, called me selfish, said I was holding him back. But eventually he'd understood. Or so I thought. Apparently I'd been wrong. Apparently the lesson hadn't stuck. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the window. The Chen family was still celebrating. 3 generations sharing stories and laughter. The grandmother held the little girl on her lap, while she opened another present. The parents took pictures. Everyone belonged. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit in this house and disappear quietly. I wasn't going to let my son pretend I didn't exist. I wasn't going to let Cordelia Ashworth erase 42 years of motherhood, with her perfect blonde hair and her perfect family, and her perfect Christmas dinner. I was going to remind Sebastian what a real family looked like. I went down to the basement and pulled out the Christmas decorations Harold and I had collected over 40 years of marriage. Box after box of lights and ornaments and garland. The decorations Sebastian had always called embarrassing, too much, too bright, too obvious. Today they would be perfect. I started with Harold's lights, thousands of them. White ones and colored ones and the big bulbs that had been popular in the 1970s. I strung them along the front fence, around the mailbox, through the bare branches of the oak tree in the front yard. Mrs. Chen appeared at the property line as I was working on the second strand. She was tiny and elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. We'd been neighbors for 15 years but had never done more than exchange pleasantries. "Meredith, are you having a party?" I looked at her. This woman who'd spent her Christmas morning watching her granddaughter open presents while her own son worked overseas and couldn't visit. This woman who understood what it felt like to be forgotten by the people you loved most. Yes, I said. "Tomorrow, December 26th. Can you come?" Her face lit up. "I would love to. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, and your granddaughter, if she's still visiting." Mrs. Chen smiled. "She is, and she loves parties." Word spread through the neighborhood faster than I'd expected. The Kowalskis from 2 houses down stopped by as I was hanging garland on the porch railing. They'd lost their daughter Sarah in a car accident 3 years ago. Their son lived in Oregon and rarely visited. They spent most holidays alone now. "We heard you're having a Christmas party," Mr. Kowalski said. "We'd love to come if you'll have us." "Of course, tomorrow at 6. The Patels came by an hour later. Their son lived in California with his wife and children. He was too busy with his medical practice to visit for Christmas. They'd been caring for Mrs. Patel's elderly mother, who had dementia. She was having a good week, alert and conversational. "She loves parties," Mrs. Patel said. "It would be wonderful for her to get out of the house." By evening, I'd invited half the neighborhood. People I'd known for years but had never really talked to. People who understood what it felt like to be forgotten. People who remembered what Christmas was supposed to mean. I stood in my front yard as the sun set. The lights twinkled in the growing darkness. The house looked alive again, ready for something magical. Tomorrow I would show Sebastian what he'd thrown away. Tomorrow I would remind him that family wasn't about impressing the right people. It was about showing up, about being present, about choosing love over status. Tomorrow I would teach him the lesson I should have taught him 30 years ago. December 26th. I woke up at 5 in the morning with purpose burning in my chest. Today would be different. Today I would show my son what he'd lost. I started cooking at dawn. The 20-pound turkey I'd bought after Christmas went into the oven first. Then the ham Harold used to love. The stuffing recipe my mother had passed down to me. The green bean casserole Sebastian had requested every Christmas since he was 7 years old. My kitchen came alive for the first time in months. Steam rose from pots on every burner. The smell of sage and rosemary filled the air. I rolled out pie dough the way my grandmother had taught me. Apple pie, pumpkin pie, the sweet potato pie Harold had proposed to me over 45 years ago. I set the dining room table for 20 people, then 30. Then I gave up counting and just kept adding chairs. The good china came out of the cabinet, the crystal glasses that had been wedding gifts, the silver candlesticks that had belonged to Harold's mother. The house sparkled, every surface gleamed, every light bulb blazed. This was how Christmas was supposed to feel. Warm, welcoming, alive. Mrs. Chen arrived at 5:30 with her granddaughter, Lily. The little girl carried a covered dish that smelled like heaven. Homemade dumplings. Mrs. Chen had been cooking all day too. "Your house looks beautiful," she said, looking around at the lights and decorations. "Like something from a movie." The Kowalskis came next. They brought their daughter Sarah's favorite Christmas cookies, the recipe they hadn't used in 3 years. Mrs. Kowalski's hands shook as she set the plate on the table. "Sarah always made these for Christmas," she whispered. "I thought it was time to make them again." The Patels arrived with Mrs. Patel's mother. The elderly woman moved slowly, but her eyes were bright, alert. She carried a plate of Indian sweets that looked like jewels. "My mother made these," Mrs. Patel explained. "It's the first time she's cooked in months." More neighbors came. The Johnsons from across the street, the Martinez family from the corner house, the elderly Mr. Peterson who lived alone and never had visitors. They all brought food. They all brought stories. They all brought pieces of themselves they'd been keeping hidden. My house filled with laughter, with conversation, with the sound of children playing. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter taught the Martinez children a card game. Mr. Peterson told stories about the neighborhood from 50 years ago. The Kowalskis shared memories of their daughter that made everyone cry and laugh at the same time. This was what Christmas was supposed to be. Not perfect, not performed, real. I stood in the kitchen doorway at 6:30, watching my dining room overflow with people who'd been strangers that morning. They'd become family in the space of an hour. The kind of family that chose each other, the kind that showed up when it mattered. That's when I saw the car. Sebastian's black BMW pulled up slowly in front of the house. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at the lights, at the people visible through the windows, at the life spilling out of every room. He'd been driving past, checking on me perhaps, or maybe just curious about the lights. Either way, he was here. He was seeing what he'd walked away from. I watched him through the kitchen window. His face was illuminated by the Christmas lights Harold and I had put up every year for 40 years. The lights Sebastian had called embarrassing. Too much. Too bright. Tonight they looked magical. Sebastian got out of the car slowly. He wore the expensive coat Cordelia had bought him, the one that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. But his face looked young, confused, like the little boy who used to help me hang ornaments on the tree. He walked up the front steps and knocked on the door. The sound was tentative, uncertain. This was his childhood home, but he knocked like a stranger. I opened the door and looked at my son. Really looked at him. The fine lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders curved inward, the exhaustion that expensive clothes couldn't hide. "Mom," he said. "What is all this?" I stepped aside to let him see. The dining room packed with neighbors, the kitchen counter covered with homemade dishes, the living room where children played while their grandparents watched and smiled. "Christmas dinner," I said. "The kind we used to have." Sebastian walked through the house in a daze. He recognized some of the neighbors. Others were strangers. But they all welcomed him. They all made room for him at their tables. They all treated him like family. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter ran up to him with a Christmas cookie. "Are you Mrs. Gilmore's son? She talks about you all the time." Sebastian knelt down to the little girl's level. "She does. She says you're very smart and very handsome, and she's very proud of you." I watched my son's face crumble, just for a moment, just long enough for me to see the boy he used to be. He stood up and found me in the crowd. "Where are Cordelia and the children?" I asked. "They went back to Connecticut. Her father's driver picked them up this morning. Something about an early flight." But I knew better. I knew that some hungers could never be satisfied. I knew that no matter how hard Sebastian tried, he would never be good enough for the Ashworth family. He would always be the boy from New Jersey who'd married their daughter, the outsider trying to fit in. "Would you like a plate?" I asked. Sebastian nodded. I handed him the good china, the plates we'd used for every special occasion when he was growing up. He looked down at the turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce, at the meal I'd made from scratch with my own hands. "This is your mother's famous stuffing," Mrs. Kowalski said, appearing at Sebastian's elbow. "She gave me the recipe after my Sarah died, said it was her grandmother's." Sebastian looked at me. "You gave her Grandma Rose's recipe." "She needed it more than I did." The room continued to buzz around us. Conversations flowed from table to table. The Patel's elderly mother was teaching children a song in Hindi. Mr. Peterson was showing photos from his army days. The Martinez family was setting up a card game in the living room. Sebastian ate slowly, quietly. He watched the organized chaos around him. The way people filled each other's water glasses without being asked. The way they shared stories and laughter and tears. The way they made room for everyone. "I remember this," he said finally. "Christmas used to feel like this. It still can." Sebastian looked around the room again, at the faces of people who'd welcomed him without question, at the abundance that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "I know. I don't know how to fix it." I reached over and touched his hand, the hand I'd held when he took his first steps, the hand I'd bandaged when he fell off his bike, the hand that had grown calloused from years of trying to be someone he wasn't. "You start by remembering who you are," I said, "and then you come home." The neighbors began leaving around 9 o'clock. They hugged me goodbye like old friends, like family. Mrs. Chen pressed a container of leftover dumplings into my hands. The Kowalskis promised to bring more of Sarah's cookie recipe next week. The Patels invited me to their grandson's birthday party next month. My house felt different as it emptied. Not lonely, full. Full of stories and laughter and the kind of warmth that lingers long after the last guest leaves. Sebastian stayed. He helped me clear the tables without being asked, carried dishes to the kitchen, scraped plates, wrapped leftovers. We worked in comfortable silence for the first time in months. "The Martinez boy looks just like you did at that age," I said, handing him a stack of plates. He asked if I had any kids. I told him about Atticus and Scout. "What did you tell him about me?" Sebastian paused, a wine glass halfway to the counter. "I told him you were the best grandmother in the world, and that I'd been an idiot." We finished cleaning in quiet. The house gleamed again. But differently than before. Not perfect, not performed. Lived in. Loved. Sebastian found me in the living room, sitting in Harold's chair. The Christmas tree lights cast colored shadows across the walls. The ornaments he'd made as a child caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the ceiling. "I need to tell you something," he said, settling into the chair across from me. The chair he'd claimed as his own when he was 12 years old. I waited. "Cordelia broke up with me this morning." The words hung in the air between us. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, only sadness for my son who'd lost himself trying to be someone else. "Her father offered me a position at his investment firm, a partnership track, everything I thought I wanted. And she said I'd never really fit in, that I was trying too hard, that her friends could tell I hadn't grown up with money." I reached for his hand. "I'm sorry." "I'm not." Sebastian looked around the room, at the family photos covering every surface, at the bookshelf filled with his childhood favorites, at the piano where I'd taught him to play chopsticks. "I'm relieved." "Are you?" "I haven't been myself in months, maybe years. I started talking differently, dressing differently. I got rid of all the furniture you and Dad helped me pick out. I stopped making your meatloaf recipe because Cordelia said it was too heavy. I stopped calling you Mom because she said it sounded juvenile." Sebastian's voice cracked. "I stopped being your son because I thought being someone else would make me happier. You'll always be my son, no matter what. Even after what I did? Even after Christmas?" I thought about the morning before, the frozen dinner, the Instagram post, the way he'd erased me from his life so easily. The hurt was still there. It would always be there. But underneath it was something stronger. Love. Endless. Unconditional. The kind only a mother could feel. "Even then." Sebastian started to cry. Not the careful tears of a man trying to maintain his composure. The ugly, honest tears of a boy who'd lost his way and finally found his way home. I held him the way I had when he was small, when nightmares woke him up, when bullies made him feel worthless, when the world seemed too big and too scary to face alone. "I want to bring Atticus and Scout over this weekend," he said. "If that's okay." "It's more than okay. I want to teach them how to make Christmas cookies, the way you taught me. I still have all the cookie cutters. I want them to know their grandmother, the real one, not the version of you I created to impress people who didn't matter." We sat in the quiet of the living room. The Christmas tree lights blinked on and off. The house settled around us with familiar creaks and sighs. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent and clean. "I need to ask you something," Sebastian said. "Anything." "How did you know?" "About tonight, about the neighbors, about what I needed to see." I thought about Mrs. Chen spending Christmas alone, about the Kowalskis grieving their daughter in silence, about all the people in the world who'd been forgotten by the people they loved most. "Because I remember what matters," I said. "Family isn't about impressing the right people. It's about showing up, being present, choosing love over status." "I forgot that." "But you remembered tonight." Sebastian nodded. "Can you forgive me?" "I already have." Later, after Sebastian left, I sat in the quiet house and thought about revenge, about the satisfaction I'd expected to feel, about watching my son realize what he'd lost. But this didn't feel like revenge. It felt like redemption, like healing, like the natural order of things being restored. The next morning I woke to the sound of small voices in my kitchen. Atticus and Scout, still in their pajamas, were trying to reach the pancake mix on the top shelf. Sebastian stood at the stove, coffee mug in hand, watching them with the patient smile I remembered from his childhood. "Grandma!" Scout ran to me with syrup-sticky fingers. "Daddy said we can make pancakes with you every Sunday if you want." "I want that very much." Sebastian looked up from the stove. Flour dusted his hair. His expensive shirt was wrinkled. He looked more like himself than he had in months. "I deleted my Instagram account," he said, "and I called the realtor. I'm buying back the house on Maple Street, the one near the elementary school, the one with the big backyard, the one where kids can be kids, where grandmothers can visit whenever they want, where Christmas dinner includes everyone who matters." I hugged my son, my grandchildren, my family, the people who'd chosen to come home. Some victories are quiet, some revenge is just love, waiting patiently for its turn to be remembered. And sometimes, the best way to win is to simply show someone what they've lost and leave the door open for them to find their way back. The morning light streamed through my kitchen windows, the house filled with laughter and the smell of pancakes and the sound of a family being reborn. I had spent Christmas alone, but I would never spend another holiday without the people who mattered most. My son had come home, and that was the sweetest victory of all.